It's June 12th, and the first leg of our trip is over. 1,200 miles in 3 weeks after leaving Birch Bay. We're in Juneau now, docked in Aurora Harbor. Space for larger boats at the marinas that we've come to is a little bit more limited, and although we've been able to get slips everywhere so far, this time in Juneau they only had this one spot, which is pretty tight at the lower tide levels. Fortunately, the R43 is very maneuverable, and we really didn't have any problem getting into this spot. Lorraine is flying out of Juneau, heading to Alberta for 10 days to attend the next level of her master weaving course. And while she's gone, my friend Norm and his son Matthew are flying up, and they're going to join me on some further adventures in Alaska. So Matt and Norm arrived on June 13th, and they brought the good weather with them. We had sunny skies almost the entire time that they were here. The plan for this week is going to be to circumnavigate Admiralty Island. We're going to stop at various locations, as you see here, along the way. And the weather looks really good for our Friday departure. For our first night, which is going to be at the cove at the entrance to Tracy Arm. On the way down from Juneau, we spotted this group of birds in the distance that were circling and diving on the water. We didn't see any splashes for dolphins or whales or anything, but as we got closer, we could see that they were all picking up small fish, herring maybe, but there were seagulls, eagles, and terns all kind of working in this one little area. After we crossed the Tracy Arm entrance bar, we saw several icebergs, and Matt managed to scoop up a small bergy bit that we used in our traditional evening glacial ice margaritas. We anchored for the night in the cove that's just past the entrance to Tracy Arm. This is a great spot. It's got good holding, it's well protected, and there's plenty of room for multiple boats, and usually you'll find anywhere from a half a dozen to 20 boats in here waiting to proceed up to visit the glaciers. After anchoring overnight in Tracy Cove, we left for the head of Tracy Arm to see the glaciers. And along the way, we see many waterfalls, including this one. It was kind of cool because it was backlit with the sun shining through the tiny droplets as they cascaded over a ledge that was high on the fjord wall. Of course, we saw lots of icebergs on our way up to the glaciers, but the route was mostly clear and unobstructed. This two-tone piece with a super clear turquoise section captured our attention. Later in the day, we saw a similar turquoise-colored berg, although much larger than that first one. This one is being visited by the passengers of a small cruise ship in their Zodiacs. We made it quite close to the South Sawyer Glacier, closer than I've ever been in the past. The glacier has retreated a bit since the last survey. You can see that the Garmin map shows that we're actually sitting on top of the glacier itself. We stopped in a relatively clear area just before the ice started to get more concentrated.
Leviathan flew by. I got a video of
Scanning the ice flows closer to the glacier, we can see lots, maybe hundreds of seals. Most of them had their seal pups with them. About every 10 minutes or so, we'd hear a loud boom, and sometimes we'd see a splash, like in this picture, where a part of the glacier had calved off. But most often, we actually didn't see any movement in the water, and kind of speculating maybe the fracture had occurred farther up the face towards the land. Another set of visitors to the fjord are these immature bald eagles that we spotted sitting on one of the ice floes. After spending several hours drifting amongst the ice, we said goodbye to South Sawyer Glacier and began our trip back to Tracy Cove, where we're going to anchor again for the night. And here we are enjoying a still evening at anchor in the entrance cove to Tracy Arm. On Sunday, we leave Tracy Cove and we're off to see Ford's Terror, which is another fjord, but one that is guarded by tidal rapids. So that's a narrowing of the canyon walls and a spot that's best traversed only at high slack tide. This graph shows the tidal variations at Juneau, which are important because slack time at Ford's Terror occurs shortly after the tide changes in Juneau. Since we're planning on staying only one night, we'll leave Tracy Cove so as to arrive around 10 a.m. at the Ford Terror Narrows, and then make sure we're back at the Narrows the next day around 11 a.m. This is a video of the Narrows at the entrance to Ford's Terror. This is roughly a half hour before high water slack.
Okay.
There are several shoals in the entrance to the Ford Terrors that are not visible at high tide. That makes navigating to the entrance a little bit tricky. So these images from the slowboat team provide a great look at the best route into the Narrows. So the procedure that's recommended is to navigate to the waterfall that's seen at the top of the picture there, and then from the waterfall steer course towards the mid-channel and the rapids, following that yellow line. And this is a video showing the waterfall that marks the starting point for getting ready to enter into Ford's Terror. Well, as you can see, there's not much detail regarding the shoals on the Garmin display. The dotted line shows our course into the Narrows on Sunday and our exit the following day. Note that the recommended route goes directly over a charted rock. And then after entering the Narrows, the channel takes a sharp right turn and then opens up pretty soon after that. After we get through the Narrows, the fjord opens up with beautiful views up the canyon walls. Glaciers have carved through the bedrock in this area, leaving these impressive sheer granite cliffs on either side. After reaching the end of the fjord, we wanted to scout out a place to put our prawn traps. So we're looking for somewhere with about a 300-foot water depth. And we ended up finding a pretty good spot at this location with a nice shelf at about that depth. And we set out 2 prawn traps here, both of them on the same line. Then we went to the far end of the west arm, where we set our anchor near the outflow of the big stream there. Be careful, by the way, if you choose to go to the spot, as there's a shoal that extends out a fair distance from the mouth of the stream. Here's the Maggie Ann at anchor in Ford's Terror. This shot is looking west. It's toward the mouth of the stream where I took Kinsey for her walks. On June 17th, we weighed anchor mid-morning and left to pick up our prawn traps. When we set out our prawn traps, we connected two traps on the same line, about 30 feet apart. Interestingly, here's on the right, there's the sonar, and you can see actually both of the traps coming up off the bottom. And both traps were successful, so this must have been a good spot. We had about a little over 30 spot prawns in each of the traps. All right, so tonight we feast. We cooked these and made them up with a pasta puttanesca. That was excellent. After putting away our prawn traps, we continued on to the exit to Ford's Terror, and we arrived maybe 10 minutes early. There was still some current, and as we waited, we saw several small icebergs that came floating in with the current through the Narrows. Definitely would not be good to come around the corner and meet one of those. So we waited, and then we ended up going through at slack and with no issues, and then we began our long trip down to Petersburg. We didn't get to Petersburg until around 5 o'clock, so the fuel dock had closed, but we got in contact with the harbor master, and he put us in the North Harbor, which was good because that's the closest one to the downtown area. The next morning, we got up and had breakfast at the Salty Pantry, which is one of my favorite eating spots in Petersburg. We also picked up some breakfast tacos for later lunch on the boat. And after breakfast, we set out for our destination for the evening, which is Warm Springs Bay on Baranof Island. Warm Springs has a really nice and relatively new public dock with room for maybe 8 to 10 boats. I was hoping to tie up at the dock, but as often is the case, the dock was full when we arrived. So we ended up anchoring in the southwest corner of the bay with a nice view of the falls. Here's a view of the waterfall and the Maggie Ann, taken from when I was standing on the dock. As always, I like to get to shore a couple of times a day and let Kinsey get some playtime. All right, we've got our swimsuits on, and we're on our way up to the hot springs. The hot springs are right next to the waterfall, which is pretty amazing. Here's Norm and Matthew relaxing in the lower pool. It's Wednesday, and we start our day with a short run up to the fish hatchery at Hidden Falls. Here's an aerial view of the Hidden Falls hatchery facilities. We ended up anchoring in the bay to the southeast and then took our dinghy out and took that up to the dock. Here's Norm and Matt posing at the entrance to the hatchery. As you walk up the path to the hatchery, the first things that you encounter are these large surface ponds full of coho fry. When we arrived, there were two brown bears, a mama and a cub, that were hanging out around the weir. Although the main run of chum salmon not yet arrived, there were still a few that had turned up already, and Mom was making a token effort to try and catch one. The cub was very frisky, didn't seem to pay much attention to trying to learn Mom's fishing techniques. Before we went over to visit the hatchery, we set out one of our crab pots, and when we came back, we pulled it up and didn't have any crabs, but we did find this sunflower sea star. These are the biggest sea stars. They can grow up to 3 feet long and can have 24 legs. This one had 17. We had planned to stay tonight at Ells Cove, which is just south of the hatchery. But our worsening weather forecast caused us to change our plans, and so we decided to go to Pavlov Harbor tonight and then continue on to Juneau on Thursday. Because of this change, it's going to be another few hours for Kenzie, so I decided to take her for a walk over at this small island nearby so she could stretch her legs a little bit before we started off. So after Kenzie has a nice swim, we go back over to Maggie Ann, load up the dinghy, and head off to Pavlov Harbor. I hadn't been to Pavlov Harbor before. It's a really nice spot. You can see the description in the upper right there. Also, this is apparently a popular place to look for bears at the waterfall on the southwest side of the bay. In fact, when we arrived, there was a bear on the beach on the east side. But he ended up wandering off, and Kenzie and I went over there and had the beach to ourselves and threw the ball for her a bit and let her swim. Our trip on Thursday to Juneau was a bit rough at the start. We did have several dolphins, though, that came over to play as we rounded the corner to start heading north. But the waves are breaking constantly over the bow, so not really able to get any good photos. But I did end up taking this video.
Is that it? Oh, still there. Still there.
Well, we made it back to Juneau after our 500-mile trip around Admiralty Island, and we've decided to celebrate with an Alaska king crab dinner from Tracy's. Tracy's Crab Shack, the best legs in town. Our SIP location in Juneau is at the very far western edge of Aurora Harbor. A good spot. On Friday, we ended up taking a walk downtown to the State Museum and spent a few hours there. The State Museum features several permanent collections that highlight a variety of elements of Alaska's history, such as gold prospecting, fishing, and early indigenous and white culture. There was also a temporary exhibit that was showcasing recent work from some of the native artists. After we toured the museum, we had lunch at Pucker Wilson's food truck, which was a spot that was recommended to me by my friend Ted, who watched Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives episode on this eatery. Norm and I had the Cowboy Sundae, which was excellent. Basically, French fries covered with pulled pork and topped with coleslaw. That was great. After lunch, we took the seawall walk path back to the boat. And on the way, we stopped to look at this impressive whale project sculpture on the waterfront. Later that afternoon, while I was taking Kinsey for a walk, I spotted this male harlequin duck sporting its breeding color plumage. Well, it's June 22nd, and I've just put Norm and Matthew into a taxi to leave to catch their 11 o'clock flight. It was really great to have the two of them come visit. So it's quiet time now. Kinsey and I are looking forward to seeing Lorraine soon. She comes back from her course the day after tomorrow. I'll use the extra day to do some laundry and a little bit of boat maintenance. All right, well, that's the end of the video. Thanks for watching.